Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you the top 5 books that I've read this spring. So the format of this video is I'll go through all of the books that I read over March, April, and May, and then at the end I'll share what my top 5 were and go into more detail. But if you're still interested in some of the other books that I did mention, I'll have all of my wrap-ups linked down below so you can go and check that out. So without further ado, let's get started. So starting out in March, I first read The Pagan Stone by Nora Roberts, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. And A Cold Trial by Robert Dugoni, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. So moving on to April, I first read American Dirt by Jeanne Cummins, which I gave a 1 out of 5 stars. Lost Roses by Martha Hall Kelly, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Bow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. And Downton Abbey, A Celebration, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, moving on to May, I first read Us Against You by Frederick Backman, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. The Selection, The Elite, and The One by Kira Cass, which I gave a 2 out of 5 stars, a 1 out of 5 stars, and a 1 out of 5 stars. Saving Sophie by Ronald H. Balson, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. Path of Night by Sarah Reese Brennan, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And The Trust by Ronald H. Balson, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. So moving on to my top 5 books this season, I'm going to do an honorable mention because this was a reread for me, so I don't want to include something that I've already read, but I really enjoyed the second time around as well, which was Vow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, and this is the second book in the Remnant Chronicles spin-off. So I won't go into much detail about that, but I'll have the review and everything linked in the cards and up below, or down below, so you can go check out that. But I thought I would mention this too because this was my only 5-star read of this season. You're probably gonna be like, why did I include that? But this was a reread, so I tried to include newer books. Alrighty, so starting out, I first have House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, and I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding this book, and there are problematic aspects in here, and I totally acknowledge them, and those are critiques that I do have for this book and just with Sarah J. Maas books in general. But overall, I think reading this when I did really helped, because when I started reading this, I buddy read it with my friend, which also added to my reading experience, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I probably would have if I was just reading it by myself. But this book is huge. It's almost 800 pages, and we flew through it. We finished it within like a week and a half because this was when the quarantine was first being implemented, and you know, all of that stuff. So I shelter in place, and so I think this was just a book that helped me and my friend escape, and I think it just, you know, it was just helped me kind of not worry about what was going on in the world. I could lose myself in this other world that has its own problems, but it's not coronavirus related. So yeah, it is problematic, and I do acknowledge those problematic aspects in here, but nevertheless, I still really enjoyed it. It was just a fun, kind of good distraction. And I do like the overall storyline. I don't think the main characters are that likable as of right now. I didn't really like Bryce as a character, but I just really loved the storyline and the mystery aspect in here. So I probably will continue on with this series. I'll probably be reading it with my friend as well. But yeah, it was just a good distraction from what was going on this past season. Next, I have A Cold Trial by Robert Dugoni, and this is the newest book in the Tracy Crosswhite series. I don't want to go into too much detail about what this book is because I think it's like the 8th book in this series, but essentially this is a crime detective series that follows Tracy Crosswhite, who was a science teacher but ended up changing career paths when her sister was taken and was never found again. And the first book starts out where we get to, they finally found her sister's grave, and it kind of goes off from there. And what I really like about this series is that it deals with more cold cases, which I think is really unique. It does have some more modern day cases, but it mostly deals with past crimes that were committed 20 years ago, and this was one that would happen. So it follows a girl who went like was assumed to have gone missing during the time that Tracy's sister went missing, so they just assumed it was the same killer, but she was never found. But there's some things that have popped up that make it seem like maybe there's more to this case than people originally thought, and Tracy kind of helps out with this one. And I really like this one. I loved the historical aspects in here. Like I said, that's really a standout for the series for me, and I love seeing Tracy in this new role. I'm not going to explain that stuff because it's a spoiler, but I like seeing her with this new role and how she kind of balanced her work and personal life. I thought was really well done. I didn't guess who the killer was. Like, I was totally shocked about it. Like, I was totally blown away, and oh my goodness, it was just so crazy. But yes, if you're looking for like a different crime series, I highly recommend you check this one out. Like, it's really, really good. So highly recommend. So next up we have Lost Roses by Martha Hall Kelly, and this is the second book in like the Lilac Girls trilogy, I think it's gonna be. So the first one followed Caroline during World War II. This time around we follow Caroline's mother Eliza during World War I, and then I think the next one is gonna be Eliza's mother during the Civil War. So I think that'll be really interesting. But basically the premise of this, it follows Eliza and her friend Sophia, who is part of the royal upper class in Russia. And when World War II breaks out, not only is the world at war, but also the Russian Revolution is kind of underway, and so that causes problems with Sophia being kind of from the royal bloodline. And so it kind of follows their stories. And then I forget the name of this other, I'm totally blanking. Varenka is a third story narrative that we also get as well, and she's kind of from the peasants class in Russia. So these three stories are very much integrated together, and I really love that. That's what happened in Lilac Girls, and it jumps around from the different narratives, which I really enjoy. But I loved following these strong female characters during the war. Even though Eliza and Caroline were real people, this is a fictionalized story around them. Sophia is based off of some of the aristocratic society in Russia, but she's not a real person. But the stuff that Eliza and Caroline did for their contribution to, like in this case, women refugees from Russia, it very much was real. So it's kind of a fictionalized about that, but I loved this story. I loved the Russian Revolution setting. I remember learning about that in school and just being so totally like fascinated by the whole thing, and especially like with the royal family. Like, I grew up watching the animated movie for Anastasia, so I was very much interested in this, and it has really, I kind of fell back in love with historical fiction. I feel like there hasn't been a lot of historical fiction that I've been reading recently, but I was really excited about this, especially because I reread Lilac Girls last year and loved it. So definitely, if you're looking for a nice series, then this one covers, like, spans, going to be covering like World War II, World War I, and the Civil War. You'll get like a good span of this, so I highly recommend you check this series out because it is super, super good, and you just get totally immersed in her writing style, and you can just, there's something really special and magical about her writing style that draws you in. Next, I have The Trust by Ronald H. Balson, and this is the fourth book in the Once We Were Brothers series, and I read this series out of order. I read the first book and the third book, and then in May I read the second one, and then this one. So I've read it in chronological. I have like the chronological storyline understood now. But basically the premise of this story is it follows two people. So we follow Catherine, who is a lawyer, and Liam, who is a private detective, and they basically work together in solving historical fiction, or not historical fiction, but kind of historical crimes, and then also kind of modern day crimes as well. So the first and third one, deal with World War II. The second one dealt with the Palestinian-Arab conflict, and then this one deals with Liam's family. So Liam had a falling out with his family 16 years ago when he went back to Northern Ireland, and they found out that he was actually a CIA operative that was giving information on the Christian Protestant conflict that was going on, and his family basically estranged him. And then 16 years later, he gets a call from one of his cousins saying that his uncle passed away and he was murdered. So he goes back and he finds out that he was the one in charge of his uncle's trust, and his uncle had and his uncle had a feeling that he would be murdered, and he put in his trust that if he were to be murdered, people won't be able to get like basically what's in his will until they find the murderer. So Liam's been tasked with trying to find this murder while they kind of look back at their history, as they were very kind of prominent within that conflict, or the troubles as they say in Northern Ireland. And I really love this. I never really knew anything about the Northern Ireland conflict. Like, it was very new to me, and I thought it was really well done. I've learned so much with these books. Like, even the second one, which I didn't enjoy as much, Saving Sophie, I learned so much about that conflict, that modern day conflict, which is just based on my own ignorance. But yeah, I like this. Even though I was able to figure out who the murderer, or like the bad guy, was, I still really enjoyed it. It was super suspenseful, and I loved just kind of figuring this out and seeing the characters try to figure this out as well. And the last 50 pages were super intense, so I loved it. It was just a really good one. So if you're looking for like a very diverse series in terms of like the topics that it covers, like, I highly recommend you check this one out, because I thought it was really well done and I loved it. And lastly, I have Us Against You by Frederick Backman, and this is the sequel to Beartown. So basically, I can't go into much about this book because it spoils what happened in the first one, but basically the synopsis of this series, it takes place in a small town in Sweden called Beartown, which is very much its life, basically its life and bloodline is the Junior A hockey team. So when the Junior A hockey team ends up in the finals, the whole town is very excited. But the night before that game, there was a event that took place between the star player and the manager's daughter. So the first book really deals with rape culture and how that can leave a town divided, and how people respond to that in different ways, and it was very heartbreaking. So although the Beartown deals with the immediate effects that can have on a town, this one deals more with once the dust settles, like how are people still coping with this, essentially. So I love this. I think there's something really special about the writing style of this author. It's very lyrical. The way it's also kind of told from the narration style of kind of The Book Thief, where essentially, like, it's told from a narrator who knows something, like he knows how these characters end up, which I think adds like a haunting effect in here, because you do get insight of like what happens to these characters in 20 years. Like, you kind of get all of that. And the narration style, I feel like too, is also told from like basically, like, I feel like it would be like the soul of the town that kind of like goes around and jumps around these different people who live in that town, and their different ways of just dealing with everything. And I think that's something very unique in how this book just covers that dark subject matter, and I feel like it does so in a respectful and also realistic way. I think this quote at the front actually does a really good job at explaining it, but it says, "A lyrical look at how a community heals, how a family recover, and how individuals grow." And I think that is overall describes this book, and it's just amazing. And I think there's going to be a third one, some of you said in the comments, so I'll be curious to see that. But this book is so lyrical, and you just need to totally immerse yourself in it. So that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books you read this season were and which ones were your favorites. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.